Professor Quilmuth adjusted the holographic display with one of his 6 delicate fingers. The image of a massive creature filled the lecture hall, its teeth gleaming under simulated sunlight. Row after row of students stared at the projection, some with fascination, others with barely concealed horror. "This specimen represents one of Terra's apex predators," Quilmuth said, his voice carrying easily through the vaulted chamber. "Note the binocular vision, positioned for tracking prey. The muscular build designed for explosive acceleration. The dental structure capable of crushing bone." Lyra pulled her chair back slightly, even though the image was just light and data. Her species, the Felthians, had evolved on a world with gentle herbivores and no large predators. Every instinct in her body screamed that she should not be looking at this thing, even in hologram form. "How do humans survive on a world with these?" a student named Pym asked from the front row. The young Glimmoth leaned forward, compound eyes reflecting the blue light of his data pad. Quilmuth tilted his head in what might have been a shrug. "That remains one of xenobiology's great mysteries. Terra possesses more apex predators per continent than any other inhabited world in the known galaxy. Yet humans not only survived, they thrived." The professor changed the image. Now a different creature appeared, this one with stripes and eyes that seemed to stare directly at each student. The Terran tiger. Solitary hunter, capable of taking down prey 3 times its size. Extinct in the wild now, but during human development these creatures killed thousands. Then how did humans become the dominant species? That question came from Cronus, a Drellian who sat in the middle section. His scales gleamed under the lecture hall lights. "They have no natural armor, no venom, no real claws or fangs." "Intelligence," Quilmuth replied simply. "Tools. Fire. But most importantly, something we will discuss in greater detail next semester. Cooperation." The hologram shifted again, cycling through dozens of Terran predators. Massive bears that could stand 3 meters tall. Reptiles with jaws strong enough to drag full-grown prey underwater. Sharks with multiple rows of replacement teeth. Pack hunters with stamina that let them chase prey for days. Lyra felt her breathing quicken. This was supposed to be an academic course, a safe way to study dangerous creatures from across the galaxy. But looking at these images, knowing that somewhere out there these things actually existed, made her feel small and vulnerable. "Tomorrow we begin a new unit," Quilmuth announced as the hologram faded. "We have a transfer student arriving from Terra itself. A human named David Reed." The lecture hall erupted in whispers. "A real human here? I expect you all to treat our new classmate with respect and academic curiosity," Quilmuth continued. "Humans are a peaceful species despite their world's dangers. They have been valuable members of the Galactic Union for 3 cycles now." "Will he tell us how they survived?" Pym asked eagerly. "Will he bring samples?" "Data files. I have been collecting information on Terran fauna for years. I am certain David will be happy to answer your questions," Quilmuth said. "For tonight's assignment, I want each of you to prepare 3 questions about human survival strategies on Terra. We will use these as the basis for discussion when David joins us." As the class filed out, Lyra overheard other students talking excitedly. Some wanted to know about human technology. Others wondered if humans looked as frightening as their planet suggested. A few of the bolder students joked about challenging the human to contests of strength or speed. Lyra said nothing. She walked quickly toward her dormitory, trying not to think about those teeth, those claws, those predatory eyes. Humans lived with those things. Walked past them, somehow avoided being eaten long enough to build civilization. What kind of species did that make them? In her room, Lyra pulled up the public information files on humans. They were smaller than Drellians, softer than Crothians, and lacked the sensory abilities of her own people. They seemed almost fragile in the images with their smooth skin and small teeth, but they came from a death world. That had to mean something. She read about human history, about how they had spread across their planet despite impossible odds, how they had survived ice ages and droughts and predators that should have wiped them out. The files mentioned something called domestication, but the translation made little sense. Humans had somehow convinced other species to live with them, to help them. Lyra closed the files and tried to sleep, but the images from class kept returning. Those massive jaws, those hunting eyes, and tomorrow she would meet someone who had grown up surrounded by such things. The next morning, Lyra arrived at the Commons area early. She was not the only one. At least 20 students had gathered, all watching the arrival terminal. A human was coming, and despite her fear, she had to see what someone from a death world looked like. When David finally appeared through the transport gate, Lyra was surprised. He looked so normal. Young, probably close to her own age in equivalent years. He wore simple clothing and carried a bag over one shoulder. He smiled at the crowd and raised one hand in greeting, but then Lyra saw what walked beside him. A large crate hovering on anti-gravity supports marked with symbols she did not recognize. Warning labels covered every surface. Biohazard indicators flashed red. Reinforced containment seals lined the edges. David noticed everyone staring at the crate. His smile widened. "Sorry about the dramatic entrance," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Galactic transport regulations. They get nervous about passengers from Terra." "What is in the container?" someone asked. David patted the crate affectionately. "This is Duke, my best friend. I am hoping the university will let him attend classes with me." The crate made a sound, deep, rumbling, primal half. The students in the commons area took 3 steps. "Beck." David just laughed and kept walking toward the administration building. The ominous crate floating behind him like a shadow. Lyra felt her heart's pounding. Whatever was in that container, it was alive. It was from Terra, and the human called it his best friend. David sat in the administration office and tried not to laugh at the 3 officials staring at him, like he had brought a live bomb into their building. Dean Vortash, a tall Crothian with purple skin and worry lines creasing his forehead, kept glancing at the sealed crate in the corner. "Let me understand this correctly," Vortash said slowly. "You want to bring a Terran apex predator to classes." "Duke is not just any animal," David explained, keeping his tone patient. "He is a trained companion. I have all the documentation here." He slid a data chip across the desk. The dean inserted it into his terminal. His eyes widened as he read. "Training certificates, behavioral assessments, medical records. This is very thorough. Humans take companion animals seriously," David said. "Duke has been with me since he was 8 weeks old. He is 4 years old now. Never shown aggression toward anyone who was not an actual threat." "Not an actual threat," repeated Administrator Fellness, a nervous Avarian whose feathers kept ruffling. "How does it determine threat?" "He reads body language and takes cues from me," David explained. "If I am calm, he is calm. If someone genuinely tries to hurt me or others, he will protect us. But he has never bitten anyone. Not once." From the crate came a soft whining sound. David glanced over. "He needs to stretch his legs." "The transport was long." "Absolutely not," Vortash said immediately. "Not until we have assessed the situation fully." David pulled out another document. "With respect, Dean Vortash, Galactic Union law is clear on this. Students with documented disabilities or conditions requiring support animals must be reasonably accommodated. I have anxiety from a shuttle accident 3 years ago. Duke is certified as an emotional support animal." Fellness fluttered her wings anxiously. "But the other students, their safety is guaranteed by Duke's training record," David said firmly but politely. "I understand your concerns, truly. But Duke has passed every safety test your own regulations require. I checked before enrolling." Vortash exchanged glances with his colleagues. They held a whispered conversation in a language David did not speak. Finally, the dean turned back to him. "A demonstration," Vortash said, "tomorrow morning in the secure amphitheater. You will show us that this animal is truly safe. If we are satisfied, you may bring it to classes under strict supervision." David nodded. "That is fair. Thank you." "Do not thank us yet," Vortash muttered. After David left, wheeling the crate back toward student housing, Fellness turned to the dean. "Are we actually considering this?" "The law is clear," Vortash said, "and the human made valid points. But I want security present tomorrow. Full medical teams on standby. If that creature shows even a hint of danger, the human will find other accommodations for it immediately." Word of the demonstration spread through campus faster than light through vacuum. By evening, every student knew. The human was going to reveal what was in the crate. The thing that made those sounds. The thing from a death world. Professor Quilmuth found David in the student center that evening, eating something from the human-compatible food dispensers. The professor approached carefully. "David, I am Professor Quilmuth. You will be in my xenobiology course." David stood and offered his hand, a human greeting Quilmuth had read about. The professor touched it briefly with his own appendage, finding the gesture oddly personal. I wanted to discuss tomorrow, Quilmouth said, settling into a chair across from David. This demonstration, many students are frightened. I know, David said quietly. I have seen how people react to Duke before. But they always understand once they meet him properly. What exactly is Duke? Quilmouth asked. The genetic data in your file suggests canine heritage but with significant variance. He is a wolf-dog hybrid, David explained. Part gray wolf, part domestic dog. It is a breed that exists specifically because humans wanted companions with both wild traits and gentle temperaments. Quilmouth felt his academic curiosity stirring. You intentionally bred predators? We did not see them as predators, David said. Not enemies, anyway. Wolves and humans started working together thousands of years ago. Before we had advanced technology, before we had cities, we hunted together, protected each other, and eventually some wolves evolved into dogs. Domestic companions evolved through natural selection? Artificial selection, David corrected. We chose the friendliest wolves, the ones who trusted us. Generation after generation, we shaped each other. They became more social, more attuned to human emotions. We became better at understanding their needs and signals. Quilmouth absorbed this information with growing fascination. So Duke is part of this ancient partnership. Every dog is, David said simply. That is what people do not understand about humans and Earth. Yes, we have dangerous predators, but we do not just survive them. We live with them. Some we domesticated into partners. Others we learned to coexist with, to respect from a distance. We are not at war with our own planet. Most species are, Quilmouth admitted. Even peaceful worlds have animals to avoid, territories marked dangerous. We survive by separation. We survive by connection, David said. The professor left that conversation with more questions than answers. He spent the night reviewing everything known about Terran domestication. The data was sparse, mostly observational notes from the handful of non-humans who had visited Earth. But one fact appeared repeatedly. Humans kept predators in their homes, with their children. As family members, it should not work. Every biological model said such arrangements would end in tragedy. Predators followed instinct. They hunted. They killed. Yet humans had been doing this for 30,000 years. When morning arrived, nearly half the student body gathered at the secure amphitheater. They sat in sections separated by barriers and safety fields. Medical teams waited in 3 locations. Security officers carried stun weapons and watched the center arena carefully. David entered alone, guiding the crate with calm confidence. He reached the middle of the space and turned to face the crowd. Thank you all for coming, he said, his voice amplified by the sound system. I know many of you are nervous. That is natural. But I promise by the end of this demonstration, you will understand. He placed one hand on the crate's seal. On Earth, humans have lived alongside predators for our entire history. We learned something important. Danger and friendship are not opposites. The most powerful creatures can also be the most loyal. David opened the crate. What emerged made Lyra grip her seat restraints hard enough to hurt. The creature was massive, covered in thick fur of gray and brown. Its head was broad, ears pointed, and when it opened its mouth to pant, she saw teeth designed for tearing meat, but the tail was wagging. This is Duke, David said, his hand resting on the creature's head. My best friend, my protector, and proof that humans understand something the rest of the galaxy is just beginning to learn. Duke sat beside David, tongue out, looking almost happy despite being watched by hundreds of aliens in a strange place. We are not separate from nature, David continued. We are part of it, and that makes all the difference. Duke stood calmly in the center of the amphitheater, his tail moving in slow rhythmic waves. David crouched beside him, one hand resting on the animal's shoulder. The silence from the crowd felt thick enough to touch. I know what you see, David said, speaking to the hundreds of beings watching from behind their protective barriers. You see teeth designed to hunt, eyes positioned to track movement, a body built for chasing down prey. You see a predator. He scratched behind Duke's ears. The animal leaned into the touch, eyes half closing in contentment. But Duke sees something different when he looks at all of you. He sees people, not prey, not threats, just people. Want to know why? No one answered, but David continued anyway. Because I taught him. Because for 30,000 years, humans and wolves learned to trust each other. We shared food, warmth, and protection. We raised our young together. We became family, David stood. Let me show you what partnership looks like. He gave a simple command. Sit. Duke's hindquarters dropped immediately to the ground. Down. The animal lowered himself to his belly, still watching David with alert but relaxed attention. Stay. David walked 20 paces away. Duke did not move, though his eyes tracked his human across the arena floor. Come. Duke bounded forward, covering the distance in seconds with powerful strides that made several students gasp. But instead of attacking, the animal stopped directly in front of David and sat again without being told. Good boy, David said warmly, producing a small treat from his pocket. Duke took it gently, barely using his teeth at all. Cronus called out from the middle section, his voice skeptical. Anyone can train an animal with food rewards. That does not make it safe. You are right, David agreed. So let me show you something else. He turned to Dean Vortash, who was watching from a raised platform. Dean, would you be willing to approach? Just to the safety line, not all the way into the arena. Vortash hesitated, then stood. He walked down to where a glowing line marked the separation between the protected areas and the demonstration space. Duke's head turned, tracking this new movement. Duke, friend, David said clearly. The animal's posture shifted immediately. His tail wagged faster. His mouth opened in what almost looked like a smile. When I say that word, Duke knows the person is safe, David explained. He will treat them with gentleness. Watch. He called Duke to him, then gave another command in a language most of the students did not recognize. Duke walked calmly to the safety line and sat down right in front of Dean Vortash, tail still wagging. You may touch his head if you wish, David offered. I promise he will not bite. Vortash looked like he was reconsidering every decision that had led to this moment. But his academic curiosity won. Slowly, carefully, he extended one hand over the barrier line. Duke sniffed it, then allowed the dean's palm to rest on his head. Remarkable, Vortash breathed. His fur is soft and warm. He is not tense at all. Because he trusts me and I said you are a friend, David explained. That is the foundation of everything. Trust. For the next 30 minutes, David put Duke through a series of demonstrations. He showed how Duke could identify specific scents, find hidden objects, and even perform what David called tricks like rolling over and shaking hands. With each action, Duke proved himself to be intelligent, obedient, and surprisingly gentle for such a powerful creature. Lyra watched it all with her hearts beating fast. Part of her brain still screamed that this was dangerous, that the animal could turn violent at any moment. But the evidence before her eyes told a different story. Duke was not a barely controlled monster. He was a trained companion who clearly loved his human. I have one more demonstration, David said. This one is important. He lay down on the ground, flat on his back, completely vulnerable. The crowd murmured nervously. In predator terms, this is a submission posture, Professor Quilmuth called out, his academic instincts engaged. You are exposing your vital areas. Exactly, David confirmed. Now watch what Duke does. The animal approached his human and instead of attacking, lay down beside him. Duke rested his head on David's chest, and David wrapped one arm around the animal's shoulders. This is how Duke sleeps every night, David said from his position on the ground, pressed against me, trusting me to keep him safe just as much as I trust him to protect me. We are a pack of two. He sat up and Duke immediately moved to stay close. My species learned something important tens of thousands of years ago. We learned that the things we fear can become the things we love most. We just have to be willing to try. Security ran their final scans. Chemical analysis confirmed Duke had no sedatives or behavior-modifying drugs in his system. Genetic screening verified he was a normal, healthy predator specimen. Brainwave analysis showed elevated activity in the sections associated with pack bonding and social awareness. Dean Vortash consulted with his staff, then made his announcement. The university will permit Duke to attend classes with David Reed, under the following conditions. David must maintain control at all times. Duke must pass weekly behavioral assessments, and any sign of aggression will result in immediate removal. David nodded, having expected nothing less. Understood. Thank you. As the crowd dispersed, many students lingered, watching Duke from their safe distances. The animal seemed utterly unbothered by all the attention. content to sit beside David and occasionally scan his surroundings with calm interest. Professor Quilmuth approached, his scientific mind racing with possibilities. "David, I would very much like to discuss your relationship with Duke in greater detail. Perhaps as a case study for my class." "I would be happy to," David said. "That is part of why I came here. Humans have been part of the Galactic Union for 3 years now, but I do not think most species really understand us yet. They know we come from a dangerous world, but not why that made us who we are." "And who are you?" Quilmuth asked. David smiled. "We are the species that looked at wolves and saw family. We are the ones who learned that cooperation beats competition, that trust beats fear, and that the strongest bonds form between the most unlikely friends." He looked down at Duke, who gazed back with absolute devotion in his eyes. "We are the ones who keep predators as pets," David said simply, "and we are better for it." That evening, campus communications lit up with messages. Students who had watched the demonstration shared their recordings and thoughts. Some remained fearful, convinced that one day Duke's instincts would override his training. Others were fascinated, already planning questions for when David joined their classes. But Lyra found herself thinking about that moment when David lay on the ground and Duke simply rested beside him. The absolute trust in that gesture, the complete lack of fear from both human and animal. Her people had never known anything like that. They avoided predators, built walls against them, and developed weapons to keep them at bay. The idea of intentionally living with one, of calling it family, seemed impossible. Yet humans did it. Not just with one species, but with dozens. And somehow it worked. Tomorrow, David and Duke would attend their first class together. Lyra decided she would sit closer to the front this time. She wanted to understand. She needed to know how humans had turned the galaxy's greatest fear into their greatest strength. The lecture hall buzzed with nervous energy as students filed in for xenobiology class. David arrived early with Duke walking calmly at his side, connected by a leash that seemed more symbolic than necessary. The animal moved with fluid grace, his nails clicking softly against the floor. Several students gave them a wide berth, pressing themselves against the walls as they passed. Others watched with open curiosity, data pads already recording. Lyra had chosen a seat in the third row, close enough to observe but far enough to feel safe. Or so she told herself. Duke settled at David's feet once they reached their seats, circling twice before lying down with a contented sigh. His head rested on his paws, eyes half closed, looking for all the world like he found xenobiology lectures perfectly normal. Professor Quilmuth entered precisely on time, his teaching robes swirling behind him. He glanced at David and Duke, nodded once, and began his lecture. "Today we continue our study of pack predators," he announced, bringing up a holographic display. "These creatures hunt cooperatively, using coordinated strategies that require communication, planning, and social bonds." The image showed a group of rift claws from the endorse system, reptilian predators that moved in groups of 6 to 8. Note their behavior patterns. Alpha hierarchy, defined roles within the pack, ritualized displays of dominance. Duke's ears perked up at something in the recording. His head lifted slightly, tracking movement in the hologram. "Interesting," Quilmuth observed. "Duke appears to recognize pack behavior even in an alien species." "He does," David confirmed. "Pack instincts are deep. He is reading their body language, their formations. He knows they are hunters." "Does that make him nervous?" asked Pym from the front row. David glanced down at his companion. "No, he is curious, but he knows it is just an image. No scent, no real movement. He can tell the difference." Quilmuth changed the display to footage of Terran wolves hunting. The class watched as the pack worked together to separate and bring down a large herbivore. It was efficient and brutal in equal measure. "These are Duke's ancestors," the professor said, "before humans and canines formed their partnership. Notice the coordination, the way each member knows their role without verbal commands." Duke watched the recording with intense focus now. A soft whine escaped his throat. "He recognizes them," Lyra said, surprising herself by speaking up. "His own kind." "In a way," David agreed. "Though Duke has never met a wild wolf. He was born in a breeding program, raised around humans and other dogs, but yes, something in him knows those are relatives." Cronus leaned back in his seat, arms crossed. "If his instincts are that strong, how can you be sure he will not revert to wild behavior?" "Instinct usually wins over training," Not for domestic animals, David replied. That is the point of domestication. We did not break their instincts. We redirected them. Duke still has pack instincts, but I am his pack now. His hunting drive gets channeled into playing fetch. His territorial nature makes him protective of our home. The instincts are still there, just serving different purposes. Quilmuth paused the video. This is a concept my species struggles to understand. We see instinct as fixed, immutable. You suggest it can be fluid? Instinct provides the foundation, David explained. But behavior builds on that foundation. Duke is hardwired to be loyal to his pack, to protect his territory, to communicate through body language. Those instincts make him a great companion, not a danger. The professor displayed brain scans of both wild wolves and domestic dogs. Studies done by human researchers show structural differences in the brain regions associated with social bonding and aggression response. Dogs literally evolved different neural pathways. Because we selected for it, David said. Over thousands of generations, humans chose the wolves that were friendliest, most comfortable around people, best at reading our emotions. Those wolves had more puppies. Eventually, they became dogs. Directed evolution, Quilmuth mused. Fascinating. You became the selective pressure that shaped another species. And they shaped us too, David added. Humans who could understand and work with dogs survived better. We evolved together. The lecture continued with Quilmuth discussing pack hierarchies across multiple species. Throughout it all, Duke provided real-time examples. When the professor mentioned submission postures, Duke demonstrated by rolling onto his back at David's gentle command. When discussing pack loyalty, David explained how Duke would refuse to eat if he thought David was hungry, offering his food first. About halfway through the class, Pym's bag shifted. A small creature emerged, one of the mouse-like beings the Glymoth kept as pets. It squeaked and scurried across the floor. Duke's entire demeanor changed in an instant. His head snapped toward the movement, ears forward, body tensing. Every student in the room froze. This was the moment they had feared. Prey triggers predator. Instinct takes over, but Duke did not lunge. He looked at the small creature, then immediately turned his head to David, ears back in a questioning posture. David met his gaze and gave a slight shake of his head. No, leave it. Duke relaxed immediately, returning his head to his paws. The prey drive was there, clearly present, but overridden by training and trust. Pym scrambled to retrieve his escaped pet, apologizing profusely. I am sorry, I did not mean to test him like that. It is fine, David assured him. This is exactly the kind of thing Duke is trained for. He knows the difference between appropriate and inappropriate prey. Plus, in his mind, nothing is prey if I say it is not. Lyra felt her breathing slowly return to normal. She had been certain that small squeaking creature would trigger an attack. But Duke had checked with David first. The human's word mattered more than instinct. That was remarkable control, Professor Quilmuth said, his academic excitement obvious. The prey was right there. Every hunting instinct should have been screaming at him. They probably were, David acknowledged. But Duke has something wild wolves do not have. He has been taught impulse control from puppyhood. Taught that waiting for permission gets rewards while acting on impulse gets nothing. Over time, that becomes habit. So training can truly overcome instinct? Cronus asked, sounding less skeptical now. Not overcome. Guide, David corrected. Duke still has prey drive. I use it when we play fetch or when he practices tracking scents. The instinct is useful. I just direct when and how it is expressed. The class ended with students volunteering questions for the next session. How did humans first approach wolves? What other predators had humans domesticated? Were there failures, species that could not be tamed? As everyone filed out, Lyra found herself approaching David and Duke slowly. Her legs trembled, but curiosity pushed her forward. May I ask you something? She said quietly. Of course, David replied. How do you not fear him? Even a little? She looked at Duke, who regarded her with calm brown eyes. I know you trust him, but he is still capable of great harm. David considered the question seriously. I do not fear him because I understand him. I know what he is thinking based on his body language. I know what he needs, what makes him happy, what stresses him. Fear comes from uncertainty. Once you understand something, really understand it, fear becomes respect instead. Could I ever understand him like that? Lyra asked. Would you like to try? David offered. Before Lyra could answer, Duke shifted his weight and looked up at David with what seemed like a hopeful expression. He is asking if he can say hello to you properly, David translated. Dogs often want to greet new people, but I will not let him if you are uncomfortable. Lyra's hearts hammered. Every survival instinct said to refuse, to walk away, to maintain safe distance from the predator. But she had just watched Duke ignore his own instincts at David's command. Maybe she could be that brave too. Yes, she whispered. I would like to try. David smiled and gave Duke a soft command. The animal stood and approached Lyra slowly, tail wagging gently. He stopped just in front of her and sat without being told, waiting. He will let you pet his head, David said. Just move slowly. Let him sniff your hand first. Lyra extended a shaking hand. Duke's nose was cool and wet as he sniffed her fingers thoroughly, learning her scent. Then he leaned forward slightly, pressing his head against her palm. His fur was incredibly soft, warm, and beneath it, she could feel the solid muscle, the strength this creature possessed. But he was being so gentle, so careful. Good boy, David praised quietly. You are making a new friend. Lyra scratched behind Duke's ears like she had seen David do. The animal's eyes half closed in pleasure and his tail wagged faster. He likes you, David observed. Lyra laughed shakily, amazed at herself. She was petting an apex predator, touching a creature designed to hunt and kill, and it felt wonderful. 3 weeks into the semester, David and Duke had become familiar sights on campus. Students no longer pressed themselves against walls when they passed. A few brave souls had even started asking to pet Duke, which the animal seemed to enjoy immensely. One evening, David walked Duke through the campus gardens as part of their usual routine. The grounds were peaceful at this hour, with soft lighting along the paths and the gentle sound of fountains in the distance. Duke sniffed at various plants with interest, tail wagging as he explored. They rounded a corner near the meditation pools and heard raised voices. David slowed and Duke's ears swiveled toward the sound. I said no, a female voice said firmly. Lyra's voice. Come on, do not be like that, Cronus replied, his words slightly slurred. Just one drink with me. You know you want to. David approached quietly and found Lyra backed against a wall with Cronus and 2 of his friends blocking her path. The Drellian was clearly intoxicated, swaying slightly as he leaned too close to the uncomfortable Feltian. Is there a problem here? David asked, keeping his voice calm. Cronus turned, squinting at him. Oh, look. The human with his pet. This does not concern you. Lyra looks concerned, David observed. That makes it my concern. She is fine, one of Cronus's friends said. We are just talking. I want to leave, Lyra said, her voice small. They will not let me pass. David stepped closer. Then let her pass, Cronus laughed. What are you going to do about it, human? You are smaller than any of us, and your dog is on a leash. He is asking you nicely, David said evenly. Please let her leave. Make me, Cronus challenged and shoved David's shoulder. It was not a hard push, barely enough to make David take a step back. But it was deliberate aggression. A clear threat. Duke's entire demeanor transformed. The friendly, gentle companion disappeared. In his place stood something ancient and deadly. Duke's ears flattened against his skull. His lips pulled back to reveal teeth that suddenly looked much larger. A low growl rumbled from deep in his chest, a sound that spoke of wolves hunting in the night, of predators that existed long before civilization. Cronus froze. His friends took involuntary steps backward. Duke moved to position himself between David and the threat, his body low and coiled. The growl continued, a warning that needed no translation across any species. Easy, David said softly, his hand on Duke's collar. I am fine, down. Duke stopped growling but did not move from his protective stance. His eyes remained locked on Cronus, unblinking, assessing. The Drellian could see himself reflected in those predator eyes and understood with sudden, terrible clarity that he was looking at something that could hurt him badly. Campus security has been notified, called a voice from a nearby path. Several students had gathered at a safe distance, their communication devices active. Security arrived within minutes, along with 2 medical teams, clearly expecting the worst. They found Duke still in position, still ready but not attacking. Just waiting. An officer reviewed footage from the garden's monitoring system. The Drellian initiated physical contact with the human. The canine responded defensively but did not attack. He tried to. Cronus protested, his bravado returning now that security was present. That vicious animal was going to tear me apart. No, David said quietly. If Duke wanted to hurt you, you would already be hurt. He growled. That was a warning. Predators give warnings before they attack. It is energy efficient. The security officer studied Duke with professional interest. The animal maintained controlled aggression. No actual assault occurred. He still threatened me, Cronus insisted. You shoved his human, Lyra said, finding her voice. Duke was protecting David and me. We both wanted to leave and you would not let us. More security footage confirmed Lyra's account. Cronus and his friends had blocked her path for nearly 5 minutes before David arrived. The physical contact with David was unprovoked. Dean Vortash arrived personally, drawn by reports of an incident involving the controversial Terran predator. He listened to all accounts, reviewed the footage, and studied Duke carefully. The animal had calmed considerably but remained alert, positioned protectively near both David and Lyra. David, Vortash said finally, did you command your animal to threaten Cronus? No, David replied honestly. I did not have to. Duke recognized aggressive behavior directed at me. He responded according to his training. Warn first, protect if necessary, but never attack unless I am in genuine danger or I give him the command. And you gave no such command? Absolutely not. Duke acted on his own judgment, but within the parameters of his training. He scared them, yes. But he did not bite, did not lunge, did not make actual contact. That is controlled protective behavior, not an attack. Vortash turned to Cronus. You are intoxicated on campus. You blocked another student's path against her will, and you initiated unwanted physical contact with a fellow student. Duke's response was proportional to your actions. But he is a predator, Cronus argued. Who showed more restraint than you did? Vortash replied coldly. You are suspended for 1 week and will be required to attend counseling sessions regarding appropriate behavior. If there are further incidents, expulsion will be considered. After security escorted Cronus and his friends away, Vortash knelt to study Duke more closely. Remarkable. He truly did assess the threat level and respond appropriately. That is what protection training means, David explained. Duke is not a weapon. He is a guardian. There is a difference. Weapons attack on command. Guardians evaluate situations and respond proportionally. How did he know when to stop? Lyra asked, her voice still shaky. He was so frightening, so ready to attack. But then he just stopped. Because I told him to, David said simply. And because once Cronus stopped advancing, the threat was neutralized. Duke does not want to fight. He never has. But he will protect the people he cares about. Duke's tail wagged slightly at David's praise. The dean stood. I need to file a report on this incident. But for the record, Duke acted exactly as his training indicated he would. He protected without causing harm. That is impressive. After everyone left, David sat on a bench with Duke beside him. Lyra joined them, still processing everything that had happened. I froze, she admitted. When Cronus would not let me leave, I just froze. But Duke did not. Different species, different fear responses, David said. Your instinct is to freeze or flee. Duke's instinct is to fight. But both are just instincts. What matters is what we do with them. He could have hurt Cronus badly, Lyra said. I saw it in his eyes. The capability was there. Yes, David agreed. Duke is powerful. That has never been in question. But power is not the same as violence. Having the ability to cause harm does not mean you must use it. Lyra reached out tentatively to pet Duke's head. The animal leaned into her touch, as gentle now as he had been fierce minutes earlier. How do you teach that? She asked. How do you teach a predator to choose restraint? You show them there is something more valuable than giving in to instinct, David said. You show them love, trust, and reward them for controlling themselves. Over time, restraint becomes its own reward because it pleases the ones they love. Duke rested his head in Lyra's lap, and she stroked his fur with growing confidence. On my world, she said slowly, we teach our young to fear predators, to run from them, to see them as enemies. But you teach your predators to be friends. We do, David confirmed. And in return, they teach us to be better, braver, more compassionate. Duke trusts me completely. That kind of trust demands I be worthy of it. It makes me want to be the person he thinks I am. What kind of person is that? Lyra asked. David smiled and scratched behind Duke's ears. The kind of person worth protecting. Later that night, Professor Quilmuth received a message from Dean Vortash with the incident report attached. The professor read it 3 times, fascinated by every detail. A predator had recognized threat, responded defensively, but maintained control throughout. Had evaluated the situation and scaled his response appropriately. Had protected both his human and a relative stranger without causing actual harm. This was not simple training. This was complex social cognition, emotional intelligence, and impulse control operating simultaneously. In a predator, because humans had spent 30,000 years teaching them how, Quilmeth began drafting a research proposal. If one species could be domesticated so thoroughly, what did that mean for the galaxy's understanding of predators? What other assumptions might be wrong? The humans had barely been in the Galactic Union for 3 years, and already they were forcing everyone to reconsider fundamental beliefs about the nature of danger, trust, and the possibilities of partnership. And it all started with a young man and his dog, showing the galaxy that the fiercest protectors often have the gentlest hearts. The semester's final presentation day arrived with unusual excitement. The xenobiology course had transformed from a standard academic requirement into something much more significant. Word had spread beyond campus about the human student and his predator companion, drawing observers from other universities and even a few researchers from the Galactic Institute of Behavioral Studies. Professor Quilmeth stood at the front of the lecture hall, which had been reconfigured to accommodate the larger audience. David sat in the front row with Duke resting calmly at his feet, accustomed now to the academic environment. Today, my students will present their final research projects, Quilmeth announced. This semester has challenged many of our assumptions about predators, partnerships, and the nature of danger itself. I believe you will find their conclusions fascinating. Lyra went first. She approached the podium with confidence that would have seemed impossible 3 months earlier. Duke watched her with friendly recognition, tail thumping once against the floor. My project is titled, Understanding Threat Through the Human Model, Lyra began. When this semester started, I was terrified of predators. My entire species evolved to fear them, to flee from them. That fear felt natural and right. She activated her presentation, showing images of herself from the first day beside current images where she sat comfortably next to Duke. Then I met Duke. A Terran apex predator. Everything my instincts said I should fear. But I learned something crucial. My instincts were designed for survival, not for understanding. There is a difference. Lyra explained her research into human domestication practices, how early humans had not simply conquered predators through superior weapons, but had instead offered something revolutionary: partnership. Humans did not see wolves as enemies to destroy or threats to flee from. They saw potential friends, and that perspective changed everything. Both species evolved because of it. Wolves became dogs, gaining new abilities to read human emotions and cooperate with us. Humans gained loyal companions, hunting partners, and protectors. She showed neurological data comparing wild wolves to domestic dogs. The brain structures changed. The capacity for trust, for bonding with another species, for controlling aggressive impulses all increased through selective breeding. But here is what fascinates me most. Humans changed too. Her presentation displayed research on human psychology and the effects of animal companionship. Humans who live with dogs show lower stress levels, better emotional regulation, and increased empathy. The relationship is symbiotic. Both species became better versions of themselves through partnership. My conclusion, Lyra said, her voice steady, is that most species in the galaxy, including my own, have approached predators with only 2 options: domination or avoidance. Humans discovered a third option: cooperation. And that changes everything we thought we knew about how different species can interact. The audience responded with appreciative gestures, various species equivalents of applause. Pym presented next. His project focused on the biological mechanisms of domestication. He had spent weeks analyzing Duke's behavioral patterns, genetic markers, and social responses. His data was thorough and impressive. What humans accomplished with dogs is not just training, Pym explained enthusiastically. It is directed evolution. They did not break the predator's nature. They redirected it. Pack loyalty now extends to humans. Hunting drive becomes play drive. Territorial instincts become protective instincts. The foundation remains, but the expression changes. He proposed that other species could learn from this model, not to domesticate predators carelessly, but to reconsider our fundamental assumptions about what is possible between different types of beings. Several other students presented projects on related topics: the psychology of cross-species bonding, comparative studies of predator intelligence, and analyses of how humans use partnership rather than dominance in their relationships with other Terran species. Finally, Professor Quilmuth invited David to speak. Our guest has taught us more than any textbook could. David, would you share your perspective? David stood, Duke rising smoothly to walk beside him. They moved to the center of the presentation area together. When I applied to attend university here, I knew bringing Duke would cause concern, David began. My academic advisor on Earth told me to leave him behind, that the galaxy was not ready. But I disagreed. I thought the galaxy needed to see what partnership really means. He gestured to Duke, who sat attentively beside him. Every species looks at Duke and sees teeth, claws, predatory instincts. You see danger. And you are not wrong. Duke is dangerous. He has the capability to cause significant harm. But capability is not the same as intent. David knelt beside his companion, one hand resting on Duke's neck. Humans learned something important over our long history with dogs. We learned that the strongest relationships are built on trust, not control. I do not dominate Duke. I do not force him to obey through fear or pain. He chooses to be my partner because I have proven I am worthy of his trust. He stood again, addressing the crowd directly. For 30,000 years, humans and dogs have protected each other, fed each other, kept each other warm, and raised our young together. We shaped each other through mutual selection. They became more social, more attuned to our needs. We became more empathetic, more capable of cross-species communication. But here is what I really want you to understand. David continued. This partnership did not make us weaker or softer. It made us stronger. It made us capable of trusting beings that are fundamentally different from us. It taught us that friendship can cross boundaries we thought were impossible. He looked at Lyra, who smiled back at him. 3 months ago, Lyra was terrified to be in the same room as Duke. Last week, she fell asleep studying in the commons area, and Duke lay down beside her to keep her company until she woke up. He chose to do that. Not because I commanded it, but because she is part of our pack now. The image David projected showed exactly that scene. Lyra curled in a chair, papers scattered around her, with Duke stretched out on the floor beside her in a protective position. That is what humans offer the galaxy, David said. Not advanced weapons or superior technology. We offer a different way of thinking about relationships, about trust, about what is possible when you stop seeing others as threats and start seeing them as potential friends. Dean Vortash stood from his seat in the back. David, Professor Quilmuth has proposed a new research initiative based on what we have learned this semester. He wants to study interspecies cooperation models and domestication potential across multiple worlds. We would like you to help lead this research. David looked surprised. Me? I am just a student. You are a bridge, Quilmuth said, stepping forward, between human understanding and galactic knowledge, between academic theory and lived experience. Your presence here has already changed how we think about predators, about fear, about trust. Imagine what could be learned with proper research support. We are not suggesting other species attempt to domesticate their own predators carelessly, Vortash added quickly. But studying how and why human domestication worked could help us understand social bonding, cooperative behavior, and interspecies relationships in ways we never have before. David looked down at Duke, who gazed back with complete trust. What do you think, buddy? Want to help teach the galaxy? Duke's tail wagged enthusiastically. Over the following weeks, the research initiative took shape. Students from multiple universities applied to participate. The Galactic Institute provided funding. Scholars across dozens of worlds submitted proposals for comparative studies on their own planets. But perhaps the most significant change was smaller and more personal. The campus grounds saw a shift in atmosphere. Students who had given Duke wide berths now greeted him by name. Those who had been most frightened requested supervised meetings, wanting to overcome their fear as Lyra had. One afternoon, David walked through the commons area and found a group of students sitting in a circle. In the middle, Duke lay contentedly while multiple species took turns petting him, studying his responses, and asking David questions about canine behavior and communication. He is so patient, observed a young student from a species David did not recognize. I have touched his tail, his ears, even examined his teeth. He has not once shown aggression. Because you are being respectful, David explained. You ask permission through your body language. You move slowly. You are not threatening him, so he has no reason to threaten you. That is the foundation of everything. Professor Quilmuth watched from nearby, taking notes for his research. Remarkable. In 3 months, this animal has become a teaching tool, an ambassador and a friend to dozens of beings who thought predators could only be enemies. Duke was always capable of this, David said. Everyone just needed to give him the chance. Lyra joined them, carrying data pads with her latest research. She knelt beside Duke without hesitation now, scratching behind his ears in the spot she had learned he loved most. I have been thinking, she said to David, about going to Earth, to study domestication practices firsthand, to see how humans live with not just dogs, but cats, birds, horses, and all the other species you have partnered with. You should, David encouraged. It would change your perspective even more than Duke already has. I am already changed, Lyra admitted. I used to think my fear response was wisdom. Now I understand it was just one option and not always the best one. Humans chose differently. You chose to see past the danger to the potential, and that bravery built civilization alongside creatures that could have destroyed you. She looked at Duke, who had rolled onto his back to allow easier access to his belly, completely vulnerable and trusting with these beings who had once feared him. That is humanity's real gift, Lyra continued. Not that you survived living with predators, but that you thrived because of them. You took your greatest source of danger and transformed it into your greatest source of strength. David smiled. We just recognize that the fiercest protectors often have the gentlest hearts, and that trust, once given and earned, is stronger than any weapon. As the afternoon sun filtered through the Commons area's transparent ceiling, Duke dozed in his circle of admirers. Students from a dozen worlds sat around a Terran predator, not in fear but in friendship. Each one learning what humans had known for 30,000 years. The most powerful bonds form not despite danger but because of it. Trust earned in the face of fear is trust that can never be broken. And partnership, real partnership built on mutual respect and understanding, can cross any boundary the galaxy might imagine. Duke, ambassador of his species and teacher to the stars, simply enjoyed the attention and belly rubs. After all, he was a very good boy, and he knew it. Somewhere in the galaxy, other species watched this experiment with interest, a human and his predator companion, teaching ancient lessons to spacefaring civilizations, showing that the answer to fear is not dominance or avoidance, but understanding, that the strongest relationships require vulnerability, that trust given freely and earned through patience can transform enemies into family. The class had studied apex predators as academic subjects. Then they met the human who called one his best friend. And in doing so, they learned something far more valuable than any textbook could teach. They learned that everything is possible when you are brave enough to trust.